Welcome, everyone, to another WheresSpot virtual meeting. This time, it's going to be a conversation, storytelling with Peter Friedman. Peter Friedman is a longtime, fabulous producer, executive producer, both at the agencies and at production companies. He's also worked at brands. I think actually, if there's a producer title in front of it, he's had it. And he has not only produced, but he has also had his own companies. So he started off, I'm actually read some of this so I get it right. I believe he started his career early in places like BBDO and Wells Rich Green. He also, and I think where I met him, if for the first time, maybe actually I should have asked you this, Peter, was when he was the executive producer at ILM. So he's also worked very heavily in effects. He also then moving up the coast from San Francisco and ILM up to work with Nike directly as their head of production. And if I get any of this wrong, Peter, you can always jump in.
It's fine. It's all good.
Okay. He after he left Nike, I believe he became the executive producer, head of production at McCann Erickson, where he spent a long time and trained a lot of people. I know people.
At least one of them's here,
and one of them's sitting there. And that I think is part of his legacy. That's not just about the work, but it's about how he deals with people, and you'll hear some of those stories about people he's worked with, but he's also trained a lot of people. And I think that that's a very important thing when we're talking about WheresSpot. And one of the reasons that we have him on is that he's a sharer. And after McCann, he left the production, the agency side of the business and moved over to PGA because I think he liked to golf, and they promised him he could actually golf when he worked. Is that the way? That's how that worked, right? It was all about.
Well, it was in Florida, but yes, yeah.
And then recently, and one of the other reasons that we have him on here, he wrote a book. And we've all talked, we have to write a book. He actually did it. You can buy it on Amazon. It is called, what is it called? It's called, Peter,
I'll Get the Tip.
I'll Get the Tip, and there's a subtitle that I couldn't remember. I'll Get the Tip.
I don't even remember. Donna, what's the subtitle?
I can look it up. Let's see. Hold on. I'm going to look.
All right. It's Moments Between the World's Biggest Stars and an Unknown Ad Guy.
Thank you, Donna.
Is that your co-writer, your partner on this book?
No, but I will explain.
I'm just an admirer.
No, Donna, I will explain Donna's major portion of the book. If it wasn't for Donna, this book never would have gotten done. And her
okay, so anyway, I think I've embarrassed Peter enough by talking about how fantastic he is. So I'll stop. And we'll move on to just remind everybody who we are. I'm Michael Porte. We also have Perry Schaffer and Jonathan Shipman on this. These are the three of the four people who do WheresSpot on a daily basis and keep people under control, and also kind of try to keep it all about production and keep it an exciting place as we have for 25 years. And our guest is Peter Friedman. And Peter, oh look, I actually wrote this down so that I would remember it, but I got ahead of myself. There's the name of your book right there. I'll Get the Tip. As we talked about Peter, he will be talking. Hopefully he'll tell us some stories from the book, but also we're going to ask him some hard questions and some interesting questions for people who may be listening to this that might help them in the future. And I'm going to start by asking this question, Peter. You've been doing this, as I said, a long time. have been successful at it. You continue to work on a very high level. You didn't, a lot of people in the advertising business, start off, they're writing great copy, and the next thing they know, 10, 20, 30 years down the line, they're writing, copy for a local newspaper and, doing the insert ads. But you've been doing this at a very high level. How did that happen? How did you continue to have a career from place to place to place? Was it a thought process, or was it accident? Talk about it.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Perry. I want to thank Michael and Jonathan for allowing me on. I appreciate it very much. I appreciate the opportunity to share with everybody, and hopefully there'll be something, a nugget that comes out of this that will help people, because that's really why we're here. So, okay. I can answer the question, and I'm going to give you that. But I think the most important thing to me is that there's no way that I would have been able to do what I did or continue to do what I'm doing now on the level that I'm doing it without a lot of very special people. And I was very lucky to be able to work with people that were smarter than I am and hire people that were smarter than I am. One of them was Jonathan Shipman. That was my first hire. The most important thing, I think, for me was fear. Always fear. I was terrified every day that, one, if I didn't get out of bed and do the best job that I possibly could, that they would find out that I was a fraud, that I really was no good, that I couldn't do the job. So I better get my ass out of bed, and I better work my butt off. Okay. Leave your watch at home. You don't need to know the time. You don't need to know where you are. Just do the job and do it right. And the luck factor, okay, I'm going to use the two words. Fear was one of the things that drives me, and it still does. I still get out of bed in the morning terrified about, oh my God, can I produce this job? The client just called me up 2 hours ago and changed the whole thing. I'm going to Korea, now I'm going to LA, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's what this business has been for the 50 years. And what kept me going basically was fear that I would become irrelevant. We hear about people that get older in the business, and it's a fact of life. And, I go through it, and other people that have been doing this a long time, we all deal with that fear factor that, we're going to become irrelevant someday. And we don't want that to happen. We want to continue to do great work. We want to continue to help other people, push and make things happen. That's really what drives me, every day to get out of bed and do it. I need to prove to myself, basically, that I still can do it and that I could do it. I was terrified as a young guy. I was so out of my element. And working with people, learning the business, even writing the first time, I remember writing on a typewriter in those days. Producer, I didn't know what a producer did. I knew making junky films in college and stuff. That was a long time ago. So you learn what your role is. You learn how to read a room. You learn how to listen. God, learning how to listen has helped me so much in this business. You can't learn when you're talking. You go into a room, if you're doing all the talking, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to learn from one of the great writers that you were working with, And I was just lucky. I was lucky. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a forward trajectory. I wanted to produce. I got in the business. I offered to work for free when I got out of college. I'll do anything. So they hired me for free. I won't mention the production company. They're not around today. And I worked my butt off for about 2 months before I made a first nickel. But I learned a lot. And I learned that this was not going to be an easy road. And I think for the younger people that are thinking about getting in this business or in it or have their toe just in it, there's no shortcuts. You got to work your butt off. You got to be afraid every day. You talk to the greatest actors in the world, and they go on Broadway, and every night they're terrified. And if they're not, they're going to screw up. And that's the way I feel about my job. I'm there to basically do whatever is needed. I'm not sure the young people going into the business today are willing to make that sacrifice, but I can tell you that if you do make the sacrifice and you put the time in and you learn how to work with people, okay, and treat everybody the same. That was the first thing I learned when I was a punk in this business. They treated me with respect. I didn't know anything. The first shoot I was on almost fell out of a helicopter. I didn't know what I was doing, but the people around me were super smart and super nice, and they helped me. And I learned my lesson. You treat everyone on the crew, from the craft service guys and gals to the director the same way you want to be treated. And I think that drives me to stay in the business. I love interacting with people, especially young people that might want to learn something and will ask you something. And I've been fortunate enough to make enough mistakes, because that's how we learn. You make a mistake, fine. You own up to it, but you don't make the same mistake twice.
Got it.
That is one of the keys, I think.
So what I'm hearing is two things. One, fear is a good motivator, and luck is great. I will quote my father, though, who would say that we all have the same amount of luck. The difference between people who do well and people who don't are people who can take advantage of the luck when it shows up. And so preparation, dealing with people, understanding, learning, all that stuff that you need to do to be able to do the job, you can't do it without learning, right? So yes, luck is great, but yes, being open to the people that you work with, I think is a huge piece of advice for young people. So
want to learn. I mean, I am such a non-techno person. Okay. I mean, I basically know how to turn the computer on. I can do a little thumping around. You would leave me in the dust in about 5 minutes, 3 minutes. And so would most other people. But I push myself to learn as much as I can, to stay not equal where other people are, but ahead of them. Because if you're not ahead of them, then you're going to be catching up. And that's always been the driver for me. And Jonathan knows, working with me together, we talk about technology, and we would laugh that someday we're actually going to do this stupid thing, and we're going to be watching something. And my entire department at McCann laughed at me and said, "You don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here, go away." But it came to fruition, not because I was smart, but just because I could read the trends and what was going on. And I had people like Jonathan and Kathy and the other people around me and Greg that basically saw the same trends. And we all work together. If you can't work with people, don't get into business. Don't even think about getting in the business, because there are no superstars in this business. Everybody has their own contribution, and they all make their own contribution on whatever level you want to seek. Okay. And did I know anything when I started a company? I didn't know how to do any of that stuff, but I learned. My partner was a director. We went out. I made a million mistakes. I made a million mistakes on every job. I went to McCann and I thought, boy, I'm going to change McCann. Guess what? That ain't going to happen. There's a lot of people in the way who don't want you to change. But along the way, I had friends and I had people that I can talk to. I see Anthony is on this call, and Anthony and I go back, Jesus, probably 40 years. But Anthony was an incredible friend, okay, that I could talk to off the record, all right, but also on the record. And I could get feedback from him, and I would get direction from him. And those things are so important because they all add up. So when you say, how do you have longevity in this business? My answer is because the people around me were fabulous, and they helped me. And they helped me. When I fell down, they picked me up. And boy, I fell down a lot.
Great.
So Peter, I mean, it seems like a few things distinguish your career, from my opinion. One is that you've been a leader for a good portion of it, and you've been a leader across multiple kinds of businesses. And I'm just curious, like, when did you get the sense that you wanted to manage and that you were capable of managing, and that was something that you were interested in?
That's a great question, John. I never wanted to be a leader, but I never wanted to be a follower either. And I think that there's a distinction there. To me, following everybody else's path, that's not for me. I wanted to break the rules. And I thought the only way that you could break the rules was to actually lead the people and lead the group and try to inspire them to break the rules. Now, you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna screw up. At Nike, boy, oh boy, did we screw up on a we would average maybe 7 out of 10 commercials that actually got on the air. Okay, this is all pre-analytics, it's all pre-testing and whatnot. But our job at Nike, my job was to watch the brilliant marketing people and Wyden and Kennedy. I mean, how are you going to get better than the best director? But my job was to learn, okay, and to work with these people, and just, you have to trust them, all right? But John, really, it's really a hard question. There was no time in my life when I said, okay, I want to be head of production. That was the next rung. on top of EP and whatnot. And the opportunity at Wells Rich Green came along, and I met with Linda, and Linda said, "Your work is terrible." This is true. Linda Kaplan, who was the creative director, she looked at my reel and she said, "This is awful. This work is terrible. But you told me that you thought it was not good enough, and you could have made it better. And this is what you might have done." That's how I got the job. So it wasn't like I wanted to be head of production because of the ego. It was, I wanted to do great work, and I wanted to surround myself with people that did great work. I was lucky. I got to work with Sam Scally, Ed McCabe, one of the best writers ever in the business when I was a punk. I remember going into the screening room with Ed in the afternoon. You'd have to set it up in the morning before he had his cocktail. But if you happened to have a cocktail at lunch, you'd go in and it was smoke all over the room. And Ed McCabe, and I was the only guy who had a load of moviola, and that's the only reason I got the job. So you'd load the film, you'd load the rough cut, you screen it for Ed. He'd look at it once. He'd tell you what was horrible about it, and he was right. He would rewrite it and then say, "Go fix it, make it happen." Now, I was like 25 years old. What did I know? But you work with guys like that. You work with editors who had rear view mirrors. I worked with an editor, Jerry Bender. I don't know if you guys remember him, but we worked on a moviola, and he actually had a rear view mirror hooked up to this moviola so that he could watch the reaction of his clients when they were looking at the film. So he didn't have to take his eye off the moviola. That's insane, but it's a great little trick. And from that trick, I learned other things that helped me later on, ways to circumvent potential disasters in the screening rooms and whatnot. So, John, I never wanted to be a leader, but I never wanted to be a follower. And I just pushed myself.
And you worked in both production and agencies. Can you talk a little bit about the difference and which one you thought, which was more your style, and what you liked about either one?
Oh, I'd be happy to do that. I worked on all three sides. I was very, very lucky. So I worked in the agency business as a young person. I got a call from some of the folks at Lucasfilm, that there was an opening. They wanted to start a commercial production company with George's name. Okay, George was not going to direct, obviously, but you had ILM, and my job was to go out to travel the world and find directors and bring them into this company and start a company that was basically New York, LA, San Francisco. Julie Larson, Ken Rudnick in New York. We had, Bill Riley. We had a great team and brought in great directors, whatever. So it was fascinating from that side in terms of production. I'd never been in a production company before, part of it, but I learned how to run a production company, I think, working at the agency to me was, I think, the best experience because you work on a project from the beginning all the way to the end. I love the idea of a creative being sold. Hopefully you go to the pitch meetings, whatever. If not, here are the boards, let's go. You sit with your creatives. The process was, there was a process, and you had to learn that process. When I was on the client side at Nike, it was fascinating to work with geniuses like Jim Riswold. Who's going to get an opportunity in a lifetime to work with a guy like that? And all these other people, Jamie Barrett. And I worked with guys on Nike, the marketing people. Look at what they built. I happened to be a production guy who was there sort of to help, make sure everybody stayed on the rails, but I learned a tremendous amount. I wasn't involved in the actual production because Wyden was doing that, but representing which was pretty important job. And then working for the PGA Tour for me was something very different. I had 111 people that were really knowledgeable about television. We broadcast 44 tournaments a year. I believe that was the number, live to 500 countries in the world and 500 languages and stuff. It was a fascinating experience. Brilliant people. I couldn't have done any of that without these people being brilliant. But it gave me a chance to start a little commercial thing down there and for them to start generating more revenue than they had in the past. And it just taught me a whole different side of television because everything's non-union. Perry, yes.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about that. So, okay, PGA or
PGA Tour.
PGA Tour, that's a client. We might call that an in-house agency or client direct. And, I think we're all acknowledging the trend towards more in-house agencies. What do you think of that? And what do you think about that from the perspective of a vendor, a production company? Because that's, I think, a lot of our demographic here that might be on this call. And how is it different? And what does it mean?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I think the trend a couple of years ago when all the big companies, all of them started to build and develop their own in-house, whether it was in-house creative, then expanded to production, then into media, into strategy, whatever. It was the beginning of the end of the agency era, I think. The agencies had become cumbersome. They were bloated. They were slow to move. They were slow to get back to the clients with ideas because that's the way they're built. And that had worked for 40 years, for 50 years, basically, since Mad Men started, okay? You go back and watch that series, it's very, I was a kid and they were still wheeling carts and smoking cigarettes and drinking bourbon all day long when I started in the business.
You mean they don't do that anymore?
No, I don't drink and I don't smoke. But seriously, so then the clients said, you know what, we're going to come up with an alternative. We're going to build so what did they do? The clients hired everybody from the agency business and they brought everybody in from the agency business to run their in-house. And they made the same mistakes that they made at the agency running the agency in-house. So all it was a mirror, okay, to what they were trying to get away from, but they hired the same people to build it and run it the same way. Why didn't they break the rules? Why didn't they break the rules? Some of them have. Some of the clients really have. I mean, you look at Apple and you say, holy mac, those guys did it. I mean, they have a great product and they have unlimited budget. That's not exactly, Procter & Gamble or General Foods and stuff, but they all now have in-house. But what's happening now, and it's very interesting, and I am extremely lucky to be involved in a project like this, is there's another alternative that clients now are saying, you know what, I want a bespoke group of people to work on this project. I don't want my agency. And it's not putting down my in-house. My in-house is great. They do good work, good creative, good production, blah, blah, blah. They hire good vendors, okay? But it's not the same. I want something tailor-made to my product. I want something, a perfect fit. It's not one size fits all anymore. So what's happening now are these bespoke groups, can't mention names because I'm working with them under NDAs, that have been formed to work directly with clients to come up with break the rules solutions. Break the rules. Don't even think about doing it the old way. Everything, strategy, creative, and production. And again, I am so lucky to be I don't know if it'll come to fruition, but at this point, at least the dialogue is incredibly exhilarating because it's not the traditional agency, Perry, and it's not what they built inside, because most of those, as we know, are successful to a certain point. They're there for one reason, and that's to make money. The original editing facilities that the agencies put inside was there to make money. Again, I don't fault that. The agencies have huge overheads, and they're structured in a way that it's just so difficult to sustain their weight. But I hope that answered your question, Per.
Yeah, no, it's great. One of my favorite expressions is clients get the advertising they deserve. The clients that are, willing to roll the dice and break rules, your phrase, are more likely to get.
And that's why the Nike advertising that I was lucky enough to work on and that continued long after I left was amazing, because I remember the guys would come into our offices, at Nike in Portland, the guys from Wyden, Jamie and all of them were terrific guys. And they would get up on a table and they would present the boards. They'd turn on the cassette player and the music would blast off. Credence would come blasting through. And here's Jamie Barrett. And he's saying, we're going to do the Fun Police. And this is what we're going to do. And we were all going, holy shit, what a great idea. We didn't say, let's go test it. We didn't say, oh boy, how much is this going to cost? We said, let's do this. And Chris Zimmerman and Joe McCarthy, who were running it, were like, this is fabulous. Or this sucks, go back and do it again. But the point was, it wasn't belabored. There wasn't 500 layers as there are now. We had the people that make the decisions in the room. And I think that if you're going to ask me what's wrong with the business now, I will tell you that the invention of the video tap destroyed our business. It destroyed our business. Why? Because now you have 25 people in Video Village. All of them feel compelled to make a decision and make an offer a decision or something. And you can't get anything done because the real person who makes the final decision is not there in many cases. Not all cases, but in many cases. And now having a video tap, you see every blemish, you see everything. You can't focus on creativity. You're focusing on nuances. You're focusing on non-important. Oh, move that plant because, you know, it's a red leaf. You know, we don't want a red leaf. You know, that we have a blue jersey, make it a blue plant. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, guys, but if you were in this business before the advent, of the video tap, you knew what it was like to have three people on a set, producer, writer, and an art director, and you made the decisions right there. You were responsible. You looked through the camera the same way the DP did, and you looked at the shot. You didn't sit there and analyze a stupid monitor, you know, ad nauseum. So
you could also say that tape in the same category, videotape, right? Able to shoot hours and hours.
Roll the
allows
camera
you to be
forever.
less discriminating, etc. Go, Michael.
No, I was going to say, I usually don't do this, but somebody's raised their hand. I'm going to let them ask a question. But then I want to get back to the modern view of how the business is with, it's not about a 30-second spot anymore, which is what you spent most of your time doing. It's about longer form, immersive, internet, all these things. And I want to hear your perspectives on that. But Art, you were very nice, raised your hand so nicely. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Hello, Art.
Hello, hey, Peter. So look, guys, I don't want to take away from Peter's, the story, but I have a question because I am the uninitiated here amongst this group of producers, right? I'm not in the business.
Art
right?
is a department head at Post University, and he teaches also in the business department, but he's the department head and a very good friend.
Yeah. Cool. So my question is, so there you are in Portland, and some guy on the table was with storyboards or whatever he's jumping up and down. He goes, "This is what we're going to do." And you said, you guys didn't have to make a decision. That decision had already been made. But what was that decision tree? What did that look like? Was it strictly the client? Was it Phil Knight at Nike? Was it whoever? I mean, who made the decision and then trusted these people to say, "Listen, you're the best in the business. Let's go ahead and implement"?
That's a great question. The decisions were made by a group. It was usually a smaller group, but however if it was a silo like basketball, if it was just a silo like baseball, those marketing people would be in the room. Chris Zimmerman, who was the head of US marketing, we all sat in that room. We all talked. We all looked at each other and said, "This is a good idea." We didn't say, "Go back to the agency. We'll call you in 5 days." It was, you went with your gut. And the brilliance of Chris Zimmerman, who is still a dear friend of mine, he runs the St. Louis Blues. He's president of the St. Louis Blues now. I mean, the difference was you went with your instincts. Nike was an incredible brand that was still evolving. Michael Jordan, who the hell is this guy? Oh my God, where'd he come from? When I worked at Nike, there was a guy named Tiger Woods that just won the Masters, at 19 years old. Well, let's sign him up for $40 million. Nobody ever heard of that. Think about that in those days. So those decisions were made by the top guy, okay? Chris and the marketing people around. I sat in the room when everything was done, okay? I would get together with the Wyden producer, and the Wyden producer, we would go through specs. We would talk about how we're going to shoot it. Basically, they were brilliant producers. Never had a problem with that agency at all. I only learned from the great people there. And it was interesting. I can tell you a quick story. Jim Riswold, one of the most brilliant writers in the business, okay? And Jimmy was writing all the stuff with Tiger Woods, all the great stuff. I am Tiger Woods. I mean, are you kidding me? The guy was brilliant. But here's Jim's trick. Jim would show up. There were no storyboards. There were no scripts before the shoot. How do you do that? You show up on the set. He would go and shake hands with Tiger, have a cup of coffee with Tiger, and read Tiger's mood. What kind of mood is Tiger in today? Okay. Is he happy? Is he pissed off? And he would write scripts right then and there to his mood and discuss it with him, and we would shoot those scripts. Why? Because the right people were on the set, Art, that could make those decisions. We didn't have to go up a litany of people. And Jimmy was working with Tiger. There was trust, amazing trust, okay? And magic happened. It just happened. But, and the first day I got there, you know, it's like, when's we going to do the pre-pro? And they looked at me and said, we don't do pre-pros. What's a pre-pro? They didn't know what a pre-production meeting was when you're working with Tiger. You didn't do that. You just shut up and you went to the shoot and let Jimmy and whoever the director was create magic. And boy, did they ever create magic. And working with, again, the best directors. But you got to have the people that make the decisions there. And I think that's one of the problems the agency people or the agency structure just doesn't get. But these new bespoke things that Perry, that we just talked about, again, to tie this together, those people are making the decisions. The right people are there all the way through the process. They don't just come in, get the job, and then here, work with John, you know, Willie or whoever. That's a big difference.
But Peter, how much more challenging is it working with the kind of budgets you get today versus the golden era that you were talking about? I think that's what a lot of people are dealing with now, are budgets that are just so much smaller than they used to be.
Well, it's true. It's very true. I mean, with inflation built in, you have to factor it in. I mean, when I first started at BBDO, the Pepsi International group would go travel to Europe, no budget, you know, go with Fred Levinson, rent a helicopter for 3 weeks and scout the Amalfi Coast. And then they would shoot as many days as they wanted to, come back, and there was never even a budget done. I said, how do you do business with no budget? Now, of course, that evolved and cost consultants came in and it's changed, whatever. But at Nike, we didn't have big budgets. We had creative that was so special and a brand that was so special. And I see Jared is on here. Hello, Jared. And Jared was all part of this. I mean, he was part of the whole thing. I worked with Jared in China. You know, Jared ran Nike in China. I mean, talk about a job, talk about an incredible job. I went to Nike. We did the first Just Do It together with Jared and his team. And what an opportunity. I mean, incredible. But again, working with the best people. But John, with Nike boards, you would get the best directors in the world to come on and shoot for not a lot of money. We had $200,000, $250,000, $300,000 jobs, 2-day shoots in Mexico, 5-day shoots in the Canary Islands with Tarsem, you know, for the FIFA soccer. That wasn't a lot of money. So the key is the work. The key is the work. Samsung, we had a lot of money. And the creative was brilliant from 72, and we spent a lot of money. But it showed up on the screen. My job, part of my job, and the agent's job was to make it show up on the screen. You could spend a lot of money on director's fees and other garbage, and that doesn't show up on the screen. I think as a producer, that is your job. That is your fiduciary responsibility to the client, to wring it as tight as you can and not compromise on the creative. That's what we're good at. That's what we do.
Fair enough.
So let's shift gears. Well, let's shift gears here a little bit, because you did write a book, and I was going to wait until we had 15 minutes left, but I'm going to start it now. The book focuses on your work with celebrity talent. Is that true? No.
First of all, the book was
I haven't read the book, by the way, and I can't wait to. I can't wait to.
I appreciate that. Thank you. The book was, I realized early on that I was very lucky to be in this business. I mean, let's face it, guys, this business is we could all have worked in banks our whole life and gone home at 3 o'clock and, you know, and been miserable. We learned a lot in this business. We had a chance to make a couple of dollars, but it's a very special business. To this day, it's a very special business. But I realized early on that it was like, holy crap, what am I doing on the set with Michael Jordan? Are you kidding? He came over to me and he said hello. Oh my God, I think I'm going to faint. I mean, you know, it sounds silly, but when you're shooting with Mark Romanek and Michael Jordan and you're there and it's like, I'm getting paid to do this. I'm getting paid to do this, to smoke a cigar with Michael. Are you kidding me? So I realized early on I was very lucky. And I shared those stories throughout my life. When you go to a party or some guy, hey, what do you do? You know, on the golf course. Well, I just work with Jordan. Yeah, what was he like? And I realized it wasn't interesting to me because it happened to me, but it was interesting to a lot of other people. And one of those people along my career path was a gal named Donna. Holly, who has a company called Sonderfeld Productions. And Donna was just starting her company, okay, which is an incredible idea. She records legacies. She records life histories, folks, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. And the legacy, the history of the family is recorded. She edits it, and she then gives it to the kids and the grandkids and whatnot. So it's preserved forever. It's a brilliant idea. Well, she had just started her company, and she really wanted to kind of run through the logistics of working with this new technology called Zoom. So she said to me, and she always wanted me to tell me something. She said, I want to record your stories. And I said, who cares? No one's going to give a shit about that. But she said, I want to record them. Donna spent a year of her life during the pandemic. We recorded 71 chapters. And she spent hours and hours, didn't want any money. She just wanted to get the stories down. And she made transcripts from those stories, okay? And those transcripts survived for about a year until I met a dear friend of mine named Grant Copeland, who is a creative director, president of an agency, digital marketing agency called Works in Connecticut. That's brilliant. And Grant's a designer, he's a writer. We went to a hockey game together. We're sitting there eating popcorn. He said, you know what? I think I want to write your story. I said, really? He said, yeah. Send me the transcripts. Grant spent 2 years of his life taking those hard transcripts, okay, which are just fragments, and turning them into a book, turning them into a story, designing the cover. The guy did everything on that book. I can't thank Donna and I can't thank Grant. Never would have happened without either of those people. They're my stories, but they're not about me. The book is not about me. I don't care about that. The book is about the people that I had a chance to work with that most people don't get a chance to meet, spend a day with, spend a week with, whatever. That's the whole.
What about Peter? What about the movie rights?
Yeah, the movie rights. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. Brad Pitt called yesterday. And
I heard George Clooney was available.
Yeah, George. Right. No, yeah.
That's great. That's a great story about how you got it done, and it's just very cool. I appreciate hearing that.
Other people, relying on other people.
And I'm impressed with Donna, who really took it under her, this idea and pushed it ahead, and that's really great. People with great ideas really make things happen. So good for you, Donna.
Made it happen. She built her business doing the same thing, being creative and breaking the rules, and everybody loves her work. That's what this business should be about. Okay, break the rules, come up with something that's different, and make it work, make it better.
And really, it's a story about passion, because both Donna and Grant, right, showed a willingness to just go in without it being about money, etc. And that's really a credit to them.
2 years.
I met Peter in the 90s. He was my boss at Wellsrich Green. This is Donna. And from the second you meet him, you feel it. And didn't know what I was doing, still don't, but he said, that's okay. I'm here at the other end of the line and sending you to Istanbul and Hong Kong and whatever else. You can't figure something out, call me, we'll get through it, but be there. And you could just feel it, right? There's certain people's energy, and Peter's got it, and it needed to be captured somehow for posterity forever. So go, Peter, and I'm proud to see you here.
Thank you, Donna.
I will notice that, having done a lot of Zoom recordings and podcasts, et cetera, that she has the technology. You could tell just from the way she spoke, you could hear it. She's probably in a booth right now. Good for you, Donna.
She is amazing. Anthony
has a question, Michael.
Okay.
Hi, folks. Hey, Peter. It's great to see you.
Good to see you, bud.
Just for point of history, when Peter and an art director from BBDO left as a team to go into production, I believe you signed with Bruce Nadell.
It was Mike Moyer and I left BBDO together, and we went together as a team with Bruce Nadell. All right. And
I wrote the story in Backstage.
You wrote that, and you wrote when we went on our own too.
Right. So over the years, while I was busy being a journalist, and then after that, when I was doing PR, every time I would see Peter, he would say, we got to write this book. So you've been thinking about this for, I want to say 15 years, okay?
50.
and we would meet at the saloon at in the Oyster Bar to talk about it. We had a couple of nights where we would have drinks, and then Peter would hop on a train and go back to Connecticut, and I would schlep my ass to the Port Authority and go back to New Jersey. And the funniest time there is we did all this talking about how all this fascinating, and then he said, "Oh, I got to run." Turns around and dolts out. I turn around and I look, and sitting right in front of me is Edward Herman, the actor, who at the time was doing on-camera work for Dodge. And I, like an idiot, because I'd had a couple of glasses of wine, I just, he was at the time in Gilmore Girls. And my daughters, who are now 34 and 31, were big Gilmore Girls fans when they were little. And I said, I'm a huge fan of your work, and I love your Dodge commercials. He goes, so do I. And he asked me to sit down, and I sat down with him for like 15 minutes and talked about how much he loved the people at the ad agency. And I'm thinking to myself, Peter's on to something. And so I'm so happy to see that this book finally got written. Because that's the exact way you have to do it. You have to sit in front of a recording with an interested interviewer and lay your story out, and then somebody has to go and essentially, like Jerry Bender, but without a rear view mirror mounted on their moviola, and turn it into a compelling story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And as I said to Michael Porte, and I won't stay on much longer, but as you're the only guy I've known in this business, and I've known quite a few, who started in production, worked in an agency, owned a production company, went back into the agency world, became an eventual head of production, and then went and worked on the top production role on a global brand. I'm not talking about, somebody who was just a producer in the AV room. I'm talking about running production. There's nobody in this business that's had the background that you've had. So you're a genuinely unique person and a sweetheart on top of it. So I'm just thrilled to be here.
Coming from you, I appreciate that a lot.
Hey, Peter, one of the questions we promised to ask was, what was one of your worst experiences as a producer?
Okay, I will make it brief because I know we only have 3 minutes, but
we have until we have the full hour. You get a full hour.
It stands out more than any of the. I mean, I had a lot of experiences that some of them were rough, but we got through them. Some of them were whatever. But the worst experience by far, and I will not name the celebrity, okay, because I don't want to get sued, but I will give you enough hints that you guys can connect the dots. And I won't name the client because I don't want to get sued. But it was a hardware manufacturing client. Okay, that's the client. And the celebrity was a very famous female singer. Okay. And she wasn't born in America. She was born offshore. So that might help you figure it out. And had a little reputation of being a diva. Okay. And so we had this project. She had a new album coming out, and she wanted to take this. We built 5 sets that were probably $800,000 a piece. This was a $7 million project in 5 days. Production. Okay. Okay, fine. We built the 5 sets. We were at Fox Studio. We own the joint. We had like all the studios, whatever, major directors, all this stuff. And we had a 7 a.m. call for us. Okay, normal. Showed up, bing, bing, bing. Star was supposed to show up at 9, go into makeup and, all the glam and all the other bullshit that we all know about. Star shows up at 11. Okay, so that's not a good start. But we're using the body double, and we're doing extras, inserts, and whatever else we had to do. Okay. And it's now 1 o'clock and no Star. Break for lunch. Obviously, now we're all sitting around. I've got a $900,000 day that day for crew. There must have been 250, at least 250 union guys on a Fox stage. So you can imagine the cost of it. Okay, so where's the Star? Well, the Star was in the trailer. The Star was smoking dope with her boys and, and hanging out. So I go knock on the door. Hey, so-and-so, how you doing? She said, well, I got to eat lunch, So had a break for another hour while she ate lunch. Never came out of the trailer till 7 p.m. I was in OT at 7 p.m. and we had nothing shot with our Star. Okay. And Dubes knows the whole story. So the Star finally comes out of the trailer, maybe at 9 o'clock now. Everybody's there. 14. You know what happens after 14 hours on a shoot. But we didn't get anything yet. So the star comes out. We put her on the set. Roll camera. Blah 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 blah. The first scene that we shoot is the last scene of the commercial. Hold the product. Do the insert. Hold the product. Star goes, I don't hold product. It's not in my contract. Star picks herself up, walks off the set, and goes back into the trailer. Would not touch the product. The star had put $20 million in the bank the week before, but didn't want to touch the product. So as a producer, working with everybody else, the agency was fabulous. It was wide. They were great people. But we had to come up with a solution because we had 4 more days of this nonsense and we had nothing shot. So one of the prop guys went and he designed a fake phone. All right, I'll tell you the phone, but a fake piece of plastic. All right, that looked like a cover for a cell phone because this was a commercial for a cell phone launching the album on the cell phone. Okay, so what happened? We bring her out again. Now it's 10, whatever. We're into gazoople hour. And she holds a piece of plastic and she says her line, whatever. And then she does a couple more takes. We never got halfway through the shoot and we pulled the plug. And we had to go in and post and we had to put the phone in her hand and post and put all the right stuff on the phone, okay, because she wouldn't hold the product. All right. Now I had my client there. I had everybody there and nobody could do a damn thing about it. They called her agent. He got on a plane that night. I won't mention his name because you all know who he is. He's very rich. And he flew from New York to LA and had a conversation with her in the morning and said, you got to fix your act because you're screwing up my reputation. I represent you. Okay. And the rest of the shoot, she would come out, whatever. It turned out the album was a bomb. The commercial never ran. Any of them never ran. The sets were supposed to travel. They never traveled because the album never made it so that there's no reason to travel. It was a total disaster. Total. So that was the worst experience.
Sounds pretty good.
It was pretty good. And I know you know who it is, but I can't mention the name.
Well, it sounds like it was not only was it a disaster, but it was pretty stressful for you since you were the one having to knock on the door and trying to get her out. And anybody who's a producer has been there at least once.
Yeah. That's a horrible experience. I had that with a lot of other people. And I have to say, my nickname used to be the Hammer. Some people would call me the Hammer because the nice guy would turn into an evil monster, okay, when you started to approach the witching hour. So there were 2 or 3 celebrities that I had to go in and grab literally by the collar and drag them out of the trailer, screaming, kicking. They got me back, though. One of them, I won't mention her name, literally dragged her out of the trailer and put her on the set. She did her thing. We had 5 other celebrities in the same day. It wasn't like she was the only one. Just as famous, but she went into the trailer and she stole everything. Stole all the food. She stole the toilet paper. She stole everything out of the trailer. She had a posse just take it all. So the next poor schlub that came in, I think it was John, whatever, the Canadian great singer, came in. There was no food. There was nothing to drink. There was no water. There's no fruit. You know, all the stuff you leave in there. She took it all. That was the way she got back at me. So I learned my lesson.
Jared had a question.
Jared, get in here.
Yeah,
Hey,
guys. Hey,
How are
Peter,
you?
my friend. I've been, first of all, very blessed to have known this man and worked with him in multiple brands in multiple countries over the last 15 to 20 years. And I think one of the things for those of you, I think everyone knows Peter, but those of you that don't, what separates him from the rest is not only is he one of the best in the business, but he's one of the nicest guys in the world, genuine, with a big heart. And that's what, that's what you look for in an industry full of, I'm just going to say it, full of a lot of assholes. Peter is the rare exception to the rule. And that's why, it makes him a special human. I can't wait to read the book. First of all, question I had, Peter, what's the most rewarding project you've worked on? I mean, you've touched so many great things. I'm, like I said, honored to be here and honored to be a part of a bit of your journey and looking forward to many more of these together.
Well, thank you, Dubes. I appreciate it. And again, back at you. Working with you has been a great experience. You're such a pro. I think it's very hard for me to say what the best one was. There was one, I can say what one of maybe the most interesting one was. We were doing a thing for Commodore computers, okay? Nobody even heard of Commodore computers. And Schmetterer, Messner, Schmetterer, you know, that whole litany, those 17 guys who own the AZ. And on the set, in the holding area, at one time, in one day, all the celebrities showed up. I went out and greeted them, brought them all in. We had Little Richard, we had Tip O'Neill, Tommy Lasorda. I had Gordon Cooper, Scott Carpenter. I mean, I had Pointer Sisters. I mean, it was just an array of, and they were all in the holding area. And everybody, because they were all different types of people, celebrities on different levels, they all just were like having a party all day long while we were shooting on the set, blah, blah, blah. They would come out, they're laughing, they're giggling. Everybody wanted to know what the astronauts were like. What was it like to walk on the moon? What was it like to, you know, that was a fascinating day. There's a story in the book about Little Richard. When I went out to greet Little Richard, I had no idea what to call him. Hello, Little? You don't say that. Hello, Mr. Richard? Well, his name wasn't Mr. Richard. So what do you say? I just said, yo. Nice
Hey, you, right.
Hey, you're next.
And then he accused me of being an actor. He said, I saw you in that movie. You were great. I said, no, sir, I was never. He confused me with Elliot Gould because in those days I had curly hair and he had curly hair. And I said, no, you're thinking of somebody. He said, no, don't tell me. I know, I saw you. He argued with me the whole way onto the stage. I said, yeah, you're a celebrity. I said, no, get in here, please. So I think that could have been, John, you know, one of the most rewarding in terms of working with the people. It turned out great. We did a 90 in those days. Wow. We did an announcement at Messner, and the press came at 9 a.m. They did a press release. We got on an airplane. We flew to California with the director and all that. And we did another press release in the afternoon in California. In those days, obviously, no internet and, you know, whatever. But it was fun to work on that. There are so many rewarding experiences. I do have to say, one of the most rewarding things that I was able to work with, okay, and work with another person on was working with David Cohn. And David Cohn's idea of setting up Bets to Set. It was 100% David's idea. He came to me, we were close together in Florida. He said, I got a great idea. You want to help me? And he told me the idea where we would help veterans get jobs in the film business. And David and I set it up. David has done 150% of the work in the last 5 years to keep it going. But to watch the vets show up on the set and work and then go home to their kids and their kids say, hey, Daddy, what time is the movie going to be on tonight? You know, and then show up the next day. I can't put that in words. It was David's vision. And to this day, it still works. It still functions. And for his hard work, though. I'm sorry, Doobie.
Hey, I'm going to pat ourselves on the back because WheresSpot is the place where David is often, when there's a request for PAs, he has the opportunity to mention Vets to Set. And I know we've helped get some people some things. So that is rewarding on our side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have time for one more. I saw somebody raise a hand. Who was that? Did anybody notice? Who's got their hand?
Oops, did you raise your hand or was that?
I might have done it as an applause accidentally.
Oh, okay.
For that great answer.
Applause is good enough. I guess then I will use applause as the way to end this conversation. First of all, thank you, Peter. It's been fantastic to do this. You're going to have to, you go take a bath because it was just so much, so many great comments and great people really love working with you. And I know that feeling. So
thank you.
I know the rest of us.
Thank you all for coming and taking the time, first of all. But again, remember, guys, it's the person next to you in the foxhole that's going to make you great. And as soon as you realize that in this business, you're going to be successful. Don't take the credit. You don't need the credit. If you're good at what you do, people will know. And that's good enough. So that's my parting words.
Good job.
Look at the book, Petey.
Before we leave, I want to say three things about WheresSpot. I don't think that when I introduced Perry and Jonathan that their faces show. So if you guys could speak up and just say hello and say
hello. I'm Jonathan.
Say moi, Perry.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks
Thank
very
you, guys.
much.
WheresSpot for making this happen. Really
Thank you
appreciate it.
very
It
much.
was our pleasure.
If for those of you watching who couldn't show up today, do remember, go to wherespot.com. There is a link to help us out because we can't do this without your help. There is a fundraising page. So please, please help out. And thanks again for joining.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks.
Thanks so
Everybody
much,
stay
guys.
well.
Great job.
Good to see you all. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Pete.